So at the moment in the game, we're missing one important dimension of any game, and that's having some sound taking place. So at the moment, we walk into coins, nothing really kind of feels like it happens. If we hit an enemy or kill them or anything, we're just kind of, we have some effects happening, but when we don't have any sound, it kind of really takes away from the experience of the game. So we're going to add some sound effects into our world and make things a little bit more active. So to do that, we're going to need to go to our assets folder, and we're going to create a new folder that we're going to call our sound effects folder, and we'll open this up here. And included with the course, there's a bunch of sound effects that I've created here that we're going to use in the game. Some simple little ones that are kind of just basic little sound effects that we can use within our world. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is, there's a couple of different ways to add sound effects into our game. So to start off with, we're going to look at the most basic and easy way to do it. So that'll be using our explosion effect when we die. So if we go to our prefabs folder and look at our death explosion, we're going to drag that into our world here, so that we have it available in the hierarchy here. And then what we're going to do is literally just go back to our sound effects folder, grab the explosion effect. Actually, we're just going to scroll down to the bottom here so we can see our add component here. But we're going to grab our explosion effect and drag it on top of add component, and that will add this audio source to the object within the world. And actually, I'm still in debug view here. I'm going to go back to normal. Okay, so if we look at what comes up in our component here, when that's added to the game, basically what will happen is we see there's a little checkbox here for play on awake has been activated, and that means as soon as this object is in the world, our sound effect will start playing straight away. And that's what we want to happen. We want our player to explode, or her enemy, whatever it is, and we want a sound to play instantly of the player exploding. So if we wanted to get a preview of what the sound would sound like, if we go back to our sound effects folder and highlight ourselves on the explosion here, we can hit this little play button, and it'll make the sound in the game just the way we want it to. So for now, if we go back to here, although we can't hear it without the game running, we've added this little thing to our death explosion particle effect. So we need to apply this change to the prefab. So we need to scroll back up to the top and hit the apply button here. So now we know it'll be applied to all our prefabs. So we can just delete that from the world now. And now if we go in here and we walk off the edge, for example, we hear the sound of the player exploding just the way we want them to. So that's perfect. That's exactly how we want to have, and you can already tell it's adding a little bit something extra to the game. And the same thing now, as we're using the same effect for our enemies getting killed, let's do this, and we hear a nice little sound when the players get jump on like that. Okay, so that's the most basic way to add a sound to the game. We make it play automatically as soon as whatever object is attached to is brought into the world. So what are some other ways to do it? So obviously, for example, when our player is in the game, we might want them to make a little jumping sound as he's jumping around the place. And that's going to be a sound that we want to use repeatedly over and over and over again. And similarly, whenever the player gets hurt, we also want them to be able to have a moment of impact and make a little sound whenever the player gets damaged. So we're going to use both of these things here. So we have a hit hurt and we've got a jump sound effect. So now if we go to our player, we're going to right click on that and create an empty object. And this object we're going to just call this sound effects, because this is going to hold both of these guys down here. And we're going to right click on this again, and we're going to create an empty, and we're going to rename this to be jump. So on this jump object, we're going to drag our jump here into our inspector, and then we have it automatically attached here. But now our jump sound effect, we don't want that to play every single time the game starts up. We only want it to play when our player jumps. So obviously we're going to need to add that to our script. But what we want to make sure and do is disable play on awake, because play on awake will make it automatically happen as soon as the game starts running. So we don't want that happening. Okay, so that's our jump sound effect. The other thing we want to do is use our hurt sound effect. So rather than doing the same thing of creating an object, another way to add it into the world is to, of course, drop it into the world anywhere you want. But not anywhere is the thing. If we were to drop it on top of any other object, it would make the sound effect be added to the object. So say for example, if I was to drop it here on this heart, now if we go to our health pickup, now that's being added to the health pickup. So we don't want that to happen. And similarly, we want to be careful with the kind of special areas in the game. So this box here is our camera. If we were to drop it there, it would be added to our camera. And this box, just kind of this white line here, is for our UI. And similarly, if we were to drop it anywhere above this line, we'll end up adding it to our UI. So that's obviously no good to us either. So what we want to make sure is grab our hit heart and drop it kind of in the empty space down here, and that creates an empty object here. And I'm just going to take off the one off the end of that there, and we're going to drag this so now it's a child of the sound effects of the player. Okay, so perfect. So now we've got these two objects here, which are, I'm actually going to just move this hit heart to be at 0, 0. Okay, so we've got these two objects which are going to be used by the player. So we need to add a reference to them to our player script to be able to actually do anything with them. So let's go into our scripts folder and open our player controller script, and we should be able to see some space where, or not see, but we're going to create some space where we can add them in here. So down below where we've added other variables, here we're just going to say a public audio source, and we're going to call this first one jump sound. Okay, so if we go back again and look at our jump object here, we can see we've got an audio source component. So this is the type of component that controls how a sound plays, basically. So if we go back into our script again, we can see that's why we chose to use a public audio source variable that we're calling jump sound, and we'll create another one called public audio source, not audio clip, audio source, if I could spell, that we're going to call our heart sound. Okay, so our jump sound is very simple and straightforward to add. Basically, we want our jump sound to play whenever our player jumps, and we know our player jumping is being called down here. So whenever our velocity is being added to knock our player up in the air, so we're going to add it in here. We're just going to say jump sound, and the way to make it play within the game is very simple and straightforward. We just say jump sound dot play, and put our two little brackets afterwards, because this is a simple little function or method running here. So we'll save this, and just to test that out back in our game here, I think maybe I left hit heart. Yeah, I didn't disable play on awake on our hit heart object. I'm just going to disable that whenever we're finished compiling. There we go. So we need to hook up these two objects here. So our jump sound, we're going to slide into our player controller slot here, and our hit heart, we're going to slot into our heart sound here. So now we're going to play the game, and we should be able to hear our player jumping once we run here. So there we go. We've got a nice simple little sound effect for our player jumping in the air. So as we're starting to add these sound effects, it's starting to sound a little bit more full. It actually kind of makes the coins and pickups and stuff like that sound a little bit more empty, because nothing's happening with them when we're collecting them. So now that we've added a jump ability, we need to add a sound effect to play when our player gets hurt. So if we have our player getting hurt as part of our player controller script, we have that sound in there. Obviously what we could do is, for example, on our hurt player script, whenever our player gets hurt, we could call the sound from there and make it play. But then we'd have to add an extra little slot here to make our hurt player find the player every time. Whereas we know that our level manager, which is being called to actually do the damage to the player, if we go to our level manager, we know that our level manager already knows what the player is. So we could say here, down here in our, where is our hurt player little function here? In here we could say, okay, so our player got hurt, so we should play the hurt sound effect. So what we can do after our knockback, or it doesn't really matter before or after, we can just say the player dot hurt sound dot play, and then our two little brackets, and we can save that. And now if we go back in, what we should get when we hit play here, and if we walk over to an enemy we get a nice little thunk sound when we hit off an enemy. So there we go. We're actually feeling, so it sounds a little bit more like a solid impact. So we have the knockback, which kind of illustrates from a gameplay point of view that we've taken some damage. But we've also got a nice little sound effect that also illustrates this for us. Okay, so we've got our few little sound effects, but we need a sound effect for our coins